Welcome back to probably the last GT500 video for a while. So this video we're basically saying goodbye to the GT500. I'm going to be taking it to a buddy of mine for the next 3 years or so, which is crazy to think about. Hopefully everything hangs in there while I'm gone. I don't know, as you get older in life, things, time doesn't seem quite as long as it used to, so we'll see what happens. But we already got this thing turned around, get a nice cold start back into the garage, and then we're going to go ahead and get it set up for loading on the trailers. It's got a long trek ahead of it. So this video we're going to be really just doing that. Might dog on it a little bit once we get there, but in the meantime we got to get it to North Carolina first. So we go start the car up, turn it around, get it in the garage, load it on the trailer. It'll be a good time. Alright, well, we got her all loaded up, strapped down, ready to go. It's my buddy's F-150 exhaust. You guys may have seen on the back wall for a while now. We're going to try that out. Hopefully got a sound clip of that in the video. Basically going stock mufflers. We'll figure out how that works later. But yeah, GT500 all strapped down. Repainted the trailer a little while ago, so it's looking nice and clean. The F-150 ready to roll. Pretty sweet rig. Definitely going to suck leaving this stuff behind, but kind of getting set up for the future for when we get back. I think this is going to be it. So pretty solid, pretty happy with everything. Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video. So I posted a short of emptying the catch can on this truck, and it got, for whatever reason, the YouTube algorithm picked it up, and it got a crap ton of views and a crap ton of comments and a crap ton of misinformation in those comments. So in this video I want to go ahead and address them. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the PCV system, how the catch can is beneficial or not in some cases, and what's going on with this truck. All right, so this is my 2016 F-150. It has 133,000 miles on it, and we're going to talk about this bad boy right here, the oil catch can. Is it even worth it? I don't know. Let's get into it. So first, let's talk about the PCV system and how it's designed. So every PCV system, you can see from this handy diagram, has an intake and an exhaust, essentially, is the best way to think about it. So the exhaust side is stuck behind the throttle body, and in this one, it's right here. And that side has a vacuum. So at idle and anything but wide open throttle, you're gonna have a little bit of vacuum in here. Most of your engine has vacuum that runs parts of the actual components. The brake booster runs off of vacuum, a bunch of stuff is under vacuum. That's how it works. So what causes the vacuum? Well, when the engine compression stroke is happening, or rather the intake stroke is happening, and the piston is coming down, it's pulling air behind it, and if it can't pull air, it creates a vacuum. So you're pulling air under tension. So with the throttle closed in the idle position, you have your highest amounts of vacuum, and as you're driving, it will lower and fluctuate as the throttle is opening and closing, controlling the airflow into the motor. So that's basically where your vacuum is coming from, and you're usually getting around 20 inches of vacuum at idle, and you're probably going to get closer to 5 to 10 while you're driving down the road. Why that's important, I'll get to that in a second. So let's go over the PCV system. Positive crankcase ventilation. What was it intended to do? So your engine naturally isn't perfectly sealed in the combustion process. You have gaps in each of the rings. You have oil film between the rings and the walls. So a little bit of that compression is going to escape around the rings and get into your crankcase. And if you had a totally sealed off motor, you would eventually build up enough pressure to start pushing out seals and creating leaks. It would not be good. So the way to fix that is you put a vent on your motor so that it can vent those excessive crankcase, not excessive, but it can vent the pressures out of the engine. So in this case, back in the day, you wouldn't have this whole system. You would simply have a vent tube like this in the valve cover with a little vent on it and just let it vent. Or a tube that might run down somewhere arbitrary in your frame rail, somewhere else, so that out of sight, out of mind, it can vent. Easy day. So later, emissions, that became a thing, and people didn't want to A, smell oil vapors around their car, understandable, and B, venting oil into the atmosphere is really not ideal. So manufacturers are mandated, you got to fix this. And the way they chose to do it was to have it vent and get sucked into the intake and get burned through the cylinders, and boom, you're done. No more, all comes out the exhaust, gets burned with fire, and you don't have to worry about it. So what's wrong with that system? Well, most manufacturers don't have a major issue. Every car, if you put a catch can on it, it'll probably catch some oil. But this particular motor, the F-150 and Coyote in general, has a pretty poor baffle system underneath this valve cover. So this tube right here, when it's removed, is almost a straight shot in there. So you have a little tiny ball valve in there, and that's about it. Underneath there, it's kind of, well, it's open for the most part. So what happens is, as you're having those high vacuum moments and the truck's just under vacuum, especially when towing, if you're slowing down and the engine RPM raises, you're creating more of that vacuum, which is what I was doing before I emptied that catch can. You'll have a lot of areas where there's high vacuum, high piston speed, things that are a lot of heat, and you're getting a lot more oil in there. So long-winded, but let's talk about the PCV system. The way it works is you have a section of this hose right here. Notice there's no catch can on it because this part is the intake, if you will. It is off the intake tube. There is no vacuum up here, or there shouldn't be any vacuum unless you have a very dirty air filter. But basically it should be free flowing, allowing air to come off, and it does, and gets pulled into the engine. And it gets pulled in because that side is under vacuum, and it's a lot of vacuum. So while it's under, if you needed the additional crankcase vent, then all it would happen is that side would go to capacity with, and then some would bleed out here as well into the rest of the system. No big deal. So this is where your additional crankcase ventilation would come from if we're able to overcome the vacuum from that side based on how much, I guess, blow by, if you will, you were getting. So that's pretty much the PCV system. In this side, out that side. So next thing we're going to talk about this particular catch can. This was a sponsored item. Tossed it on here and just wanted to see if it would work. So people have definitely dumped out up to like a quart of oil out of these intakes before. The way these are set up, the runners go up, and they also have runners that go down and underneath. And in those low points, they'll collect oil because, again, it's not separated very well in the factory valve cover, and well, we get that problem. So just changed this out the other day. We'll go ahead and pull it off real quick just to kind of show how this is. This particular can is just a cheaper eBay can, I believe. I've seen them on Amazon for like 20, 40 bucks. And there's a little bit of crap in there. Really nothing to worry about. Some will catch some water, but you know, it is what it is. It's probably a little bit of moisture on that edge over there. But yeah, catch can. So all it does is there is a filter media in the top of the can, some thicker steel wool, and it lets it kind of coagulate and drip into the can while it's performing, still sucking up the rest of the crankcase ventilation, and we don't have any issues. So, and yes, it's labeled because not everyone knows what this thing is, and I'm sure there would be problems if you didn't tell someone what it was and sold the truck. If they let it overfill, you can start sucking up raw oil. Instead of it being in vapor form, you just get quite a bit more than it's designed to. That could be bad. And lastly, this is the stock tube. It goes right here, so you can kind of get an idea. All right, so another term that we got to clear up real quick before we move on is the term blow-by. So what that is. So crankcase pressure is caused by basically compression escaping around and through the cylinder rings on each compression, or on each explosion. So as it's firing, a little bit of that force is able to make it around the rings because it's not a perfectly tight seal, and it gets into the crankcase. So that's natural on every engine. What you don't want is an excessive amount. So what is an excessive amount? So you'll see it on diesels a lot. They run at a higher compression, but if you take off your oil cap, or if you unplug the PCV system, plug in so you don't have a vacuum leak, and look, there shouldn't be chooching. Basically, it shouldn't be spitting out a bunch of pressure. It should be a nice, very slow stream of vapors coming out. That's about it. So I know this truck, I've done that. It does not have excessive blow-by. It has normal operating. So nothing crazy to worry about there. But let's go ahead and get into the comments now. They do crack me up, and we're gonna go ahead and go through a couple of them. All right, so let's see what we got. This is great. So let's go ahead and scroll through here, kind of see what we got for you guys. So let's see. The point of an oil catch can isn't really about catching oil. It's to lower crankcase pressure with the benefit of stopping oil from going into your intake. Well, that's wrong. So the point of a catch can is, in fact, to catch the oil. There's no way to increase your crankcase ventilation unless you're adding additional venting somewhere. What I have here is the stock crankcase tube. So you'll see the diameter and everything like that. It's the same. The only thing we're doing is we're putting a catch can in the middle of this. So this isn't increasing the amount of essentially crankcase ventilation you're having. You'd have to add additional tubing. So there's oil cap kits that people will use on race car applications and other things like that to have extra ventilation or bigger hose. So, and bigger fitting to go along with it. So yeah, that's incorrect. It is definitely to catch the oil, and certain motors are worse than others. The F-150 Coyotes, they're pretty bad. Coyotes in general are pretty bad with the way their PCV is designed. So just plumb it to the frame rail. Don't have to worry about oiling your chassis. I could. That's rust prevention in the north. But it would also require me plugging off both ports going into my intake, and extra work that I really don't want to have. I don't want to have dripping oil coming from my frame rails. So nope. Let's see what else we got. A lot of people put coarse steel wool in them to help catch more. Well, you're correct. There is actually a good bit of a coarser steel wool in the top of that catch can. Can't see it, but it's there, which helps it coagulate and form into bigger droplets and then drop into the bottom of the can. Let's see. You need oil to lubricate your intake bearings. Nice. You don't need one if your car has port injection and is naturally aspirated. Well, this truck has port injection and is naturally aspirated. I think what this person is getting at is that it's designed to be able to burn off those extra vapors because the fuel is passing over the ports or your valves on entry. So therefore it cleans the valves. That's true. But with the amount of oil that gets built up in these intakes going around curves and everything like that, you're then taking from oil vapors and mist into, in some cases, larger amounts. And if you've ever rebuilt an older motor that's had oil and leaky valve seals, you'll see a lot of buildup on the pistons. Oil doesn't burn cleanly. Fuel is refined oil, burns significantly cleaner for obvious reasons. But oil itself is a very dirty substance. It just doesn't burn cleanly. So it'll coat your pistons, and eventually you'll get buildup and have issues with that. So again, catch can, probably a good idea in that case. Let's see. This guy's actually on the right track. I think this is highly dependent on the vehicle. Some PCV systems really don't handle much oil vapor. Honestly, don't know exactly why. F-150 in this video sure is benefiting. Said he also has a Gen 3 Prius and some other stuff in here. So yes, that's exactly the point. Not all vehicles need a catch can. All vehicles, if you put a catch can in there, I'm confident will catch some oil, but it probably won't be as much as in my truck. And hopefully that's good. That's the way it's supposed to be designed. Replace that with an insane diesel bypass oil filter. They had one on diesel engine that made over 900,000 miles with zero internal wear. Interesting. An engine build from Dave's Auto Channel on YouTube tore the engine down and still saw the cross-hatching on the cylinder walls near 1,000,000 miles. Well, hate to break it to you, that engine made it to 900,000 miles, not just because of the Dave's insane diesel bypass oil filter. Probably kept up on oil changes, very good maintenance. There's a lot of things that play into the life of a motor. Hot shot truckers that can do 1,000,000 miles in a couple of years. All these things on a relatively new vehicle probably played into that. So I wouldn't just say the catch can is the single reason that motor made it to 900,000 miles. Wow, my 2002 4Runner at 3,000 mile change has a quarter of that oil. Well, it's 2002 4Runner made by Toyota. Not comparable, so good to hear. If you have excess crankcase pressure and it has blow-by, catch can will always be useful. I don't agree with that. If you have excess crankcase pressure, that indicates worn piston rings, and you're probably due for a rebuild. I don't think a catch can is going to fix anything. It's not going to add more relief, as we just talked about, and it'll catch the oil, I guess, but not really useful in that instance. You probably should look into an engine rebuild. Good thing it's labeled. All right, it is a good thing it's labeled. If I take this to get an oil change done somewhere else and I tell them, hey, I want you to empty my catch can while you're doing it, they now know what that is. If I sell this truck to somebody else and they don't know what the giant red thing is in the corner of the cab, now they do, or corner of the engine bay. That's another well-built Ford for you. With that much blow-by, I would sell ASAP. Well, funny thing about blow-by versus what this is doing, like we already talked about, blow-by is when you have excessive crankcase pressure caused by compression leaking around the rings. In this case, we're sifting out the oil from the air, so it keeps a cleaner intake track. Not really the same. You can't tell blow-by from an engine without it being turned on. You can do a compression test and a leak down test, and those will tell you if you have large amounts of leak down or low compression, that you probably, a symptom of that would be blow-by. The car is designed to have the oil back into the system. Which system? If you needed a can put on your car, the manufacturer would have done it. I really don't understand why people think these things are necessary. It doesn't hurt the engine to have oil sprayed into your intake. It's oil going through the combustion chamber anyway. Well, we talked about oil. It's not clean burning, especially used oil that's already running through there, so it doesn't burn cleanly like gasoline does. And the manufacturer would have done it. Well, newsflash, they did do it on later trucks. So they're still using the Coyote. They now have oil separators, especially on their higher performance vehicles. The Mustangs have them, the GT500 has them. They're useful. The reason they didn't add them is because either A, they didn't think about the issues that they were going to cause long term, or more realistically, they didn't want to add a maintenance item, and they thought, you know what, it's their engine, it'll make it at least to 150,000, 200,000 miles. That one, it'll be fine. But like most car enthusiasts, I like to have a little bit longer life if I can, so I'm running a catch can. This next comment actually hits it on the head. Yes, the catch can is always worth it. Unfortunately, people are not responsible enough to empty them when they needed them to be. Therefore, the engine will slurp liquid inside, causing further damage. Basically hit it on the head. I've responded to that previous dude's comment. Not directly, but yeah, that'll work. Depends on your boost pressure, I guess. Well, it's NA, so I guess it depends on your engine, doesn't it? I would run it to the can corners and rocker panels above the inside of the wheel wells so they don't rot out. Well, it's made out of aluminum, as this guy responded, so it's not going to rot out regardless. And even if it did, that's a lot of work. I'm going to be honest. Really not that interested in doing that. I don't want to have extra vacuum lines and plug ports and stuff run all over the engine bay. See, I wish I could find them for my 24 Chevy Express cargo van. I don't know if that engine needs it, but if it does, they have plenty of universal kits. Try Googling one. Cars function just fine without it. Yep, they do. Why don't they design one that automatically empties the oil back into the engine instead of dumping it out? Well, here's the problem. Aftermarket wise, you need additional port and you need to dump it in a place that doesn't have that vacuum. So as we talked about, this tube right here is, well, that's it. You have 2 ports. If you made a 3rd port that went into the valve cover, you'd then be sucking from this port, which is on the valve cover, and you'd be sucking from whatever drain back port you had, negating the filter media up top, so it never actually hit the filter media, and you'd essentially be, well, now you're just bypassing this whole system and sucking directly from whatever the path of least resistance is. So if you put a second hole that drains back to a section of the vehicle that has vacuum, then they're just going to be sucking from both, and you're not really going to be fixing your problem. So the modern cars have figured out how to get a drain back system to work, but that's not how this can is designed. And frankly, I think it would need additional ports drilled into the valve cover or somewhere else in the engine to get it back into the motor. So we're just not going to worry about that. I didn't know that was something you had to empty. You know, the engine is designed to recycle oil through the intake. That's to keep everything lubricated. Now you just cut the engine's life in half. That's crazy. That is a crazy statement. I think you're not educated enough to be making those kind of comments about engine longevity. Yes, it was designed to take the oil vapors through the thing. I don't think they intended it to be drinking potentially up to a quart of oil through an intake and your whole thing. That's just, stop. That's dumb. Am I tripping? Or gas is oil flammable? Well, the rest of this goes into condensation, creates liquid, hot metal. Okay. Regardless, oil is flammable. You're right. Does it burn cleanly? No, it does not. If you have oil blow-by, you have other problems. That catch can is a Band-Aid. Well, all right. Honestly, we already talked about this. Blow-by and catching oil through a catch can is not the same thing. So, yeah. I'm a Ford technician and I handle 5.0s frequently. We are seeing so many of them with oil consumption issues. Yeah, so oil consumption on these things, I don't know. It kind of seems to be hit or miss, and it really is hit or miss on the Gen 3s and later. This truck has a Gen 2 in it, so hopefully that's not too big of an issue, but the Voodoo motors from the GT350 have it, and frankly, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with that. This engine has a 8-quart capacity. When I change it, I get pretty damn close to 8 quarts out of it, so I can't imagine that it's having the consumption issues that they're referring to. Usually it's when you go 1,000 miles and you're down a full quart already. That's the consumption issues. But again, I'm not entirely sure where said oil is going in those cases. But yeah, good to hear. You should question the brand of oil you're using and your OCIs. They much vaporized oil is a huge problem, even if you catch it. I think it meant that much vaporized oil. That's true. Brands of oil do have different vapor points. I know Shell Rotilla in particular, for whatever reason, T5 likes to have a lot more oil vapors than some other brands of oil. But regardless, this is just Motorcraft 5W20, I believe is what this engine takes. And yeah, it is what it is. I'm not going to worry about it. You need a decent can with baffles. Those cheap eBay items are useless. If you say so. I dumped out quite a bit of oil, so I think it's doing something. Bro filled it up before the video, LOL. Well, bro did not fill it up before the video. I think it would have been hilarious if I had. Great way to get some clickbait, but no, that's genuine. I drilled and tapped the bottom of my can and put a petcock in it so I can drain it without removing the can. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I've seen oil catch cans with those before. It's not a bad idea. Problem is, there's really nothing below it that I want to deal with to try and put under it to catch it and then dump out a cup. It's easier just to unscrew it and just dump it anyway. Is that oil from blow-by? No. Interesting. I have a catch can on my BMW and it comes out looking more like chocolate milk. Well, that's not good, but Likely what's happening is you're actually getting a lot of water vapors caught in the catch can as well, which is fine. Water vapor happens just from regular condensation, the combustion process, and everything else. When you're driving your car, a lot of times the vapors will burn off and they'll get caught. So if your particular can, the way it's designed, is catching more water vapors, it's not a big deal. As long as your actual oil pan oil doesn't look like chocolate milk, you're good. All turbos needs one. I guess so. Why didn't you put it back into your engine? It still looked good oil, barely any water. That seems like a lot of blow-by, if I'm being honest. Again, we talked about blow-by. People are confusing blow-by with PCV system. We saw how much suction is actually happening, and even at idle, you're constantly sucking those vapors through the motor. And if there's not a good baffle underneath that tube where this plugs in, you're going to catch a lot more oil mist and everything else that just happens to be whatever's near that area. It's like putting a vacuum on your valve cover. You can make it drain back to the motor. That's how newer vehicles are designed. You're right, they are designed like that, but that's just not how this can is designed, and frankly, I don't see a reason to mess with it. Dude, what's up with this comment section? I agree with you. The one mod that people love, yet it's still useless. I actually responded to this guy and I said, it doesn't appear the evidence. I said the evidence to the contrary is in the video. I'd say you need some rings. Well, I'd say it doesn't need some rings. So there. Long-winded. Well, it's a 28-second video, so most of it's just unscrewing the damn thing. I don't know what to tell you. I've never owned a piece of shit that has had enough blow-by to use a catch can. Unreal. I guess you've owned a lot of shit boxes then, because most of the newer stuff probably should have a catch can on it. Duh, crap rings, Ford. Okay, probably bad baffling system. But anyway, that's pretty much all the comments. And again, I doubt anyone in that comment section is going to watch this video, but I found it humorous. So I'll see you guys in the next one. It's just wild.